Hello students, how's everything going on? So students, today we are going to start a new story. The name of story is The Black Aeroplane, the second part of the chapter 3, two stories about crime. First part we have already discussed lately, and now today we are going to discuss the second part, The Black Aeroplane. This part is written by Frederick Fawcett, and here we are going to read a story related to a pilot. And a pilot, he lost. What happened to him? Does he arrive safe? Who helped him? We will find out all these things related to this chapter. So let's start discussion. So the story here we are talking about his black aeroplane reflects on how one's judgment gets distorted due to fantasizing and how it creates problems. In this chapter, we'll talk. The narrator has shown here that the narrator is a pilot who is so eager to meet his family members, and he wanted to have a good breakfast, that he takes the wrong decision of facing the storm instead of doing the right thing. At the end of the story, miraculously, he somehow manages to escape with the help of mysterious aeroplane. So who helped that pilot in the story? What happened to him? And how finally he reached his destination. So here we will find out everything. Here we will read about a supernatural incident. You might have noticed or you might have heard about these kinds of incidents on Facebook or on YouTube, where people are describing, where people are telling about their own supernatural incidents. So here the story is also related to one of incident that we can say was like about seeming like a supernatural incident. So let's start discussion. The moon was coming up in the east behind me, and stars were shining in the clear sky above me. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. I was happy to be alone, high up above the sleeping countryside. I was flying my old Dakota aeroplane over France back to England. I was dreaming of my holiday and looking forward to being with my family. I looked at my watch, 1:30 in the morning. So the scene we have here, the pilot is describing, he is the narrator himself, and he is describing to us that it was the night time, the sky was all clear, and the stars could be seen quickly. Nothing was there in the sky, no obstacle was there, and the pilot, he felt peace in being above a country that had fallen asleep. So it was night time, so everybody slept at that moment. So that is why he has written here that it was the night time and everybody asleep. And he was flying over the France to England. So the way he was covering up, he was moving towards England and he was coming from France. It was 1:30 in the morning. So the time was exactly, it was 1:30 in the morning, and he was fantasizing about holidays with his family. So he was eager to meet his family member. That is why at this moment of the time he was flying, and he was on the holiday. The next day he was getting a holiday. That is why he was so eager to meet his family members, and he was so happy, and the feeling of that homesick feeling, he was enjoying that also, that now at the time of the breakfast I would be with my family members. I should call Paris control soon, I thought, as I looked down past the nose of the aeroplane. I saw the lights of a big city in front of me. I switched on the radio and said, Paris control, Dakota DS-088 here. Can you hear me? I'm on my way to England. Over. The voice from the radio answered me immediately. DS-088. I can hear you. You ought to turn 12 degrees west now. DS-088. Over. So when the pilot was in France, the pilot thought of informing the Paris control personnel. So it's a kind of formality. You have to inform to the control room and you have to describe everything. You have to tell your location, where exactly you are. So he told everything to to in the Paris control personnel. He called to them. At that time, lights from the Paris city were blaring at him. So it was the night time, and the whole city was shining like stars, tiny stars. So he informed the control agency, to which they replied with further instruction on about the directions. The control room at Paris instructed him to turn 12 degrees towards the west. So he was already heading towards the west, and they told him to move a 12-degree more towards the west. I checked the map, and the compass switched over to my second and last fuel tank and turned the Dakota 12 degrees west towards England. I'll be in the time for breakfast, I thought. A good big English breakfast. Everything was going well. It was an easy flight. So after receiving the instruction students, the pilot he geared up and followed them while putting the last fuel tank into the operation. So it was the last fuel tank in the old Dakota, and all this time he was dreaming about only one thing was going on in his mind. He was dreaming about his family. He was dreaming about his wife, his children, and he started thinking about having a satisfactory breakfast at the destination point. So even he was dreaming about to having a breakfast with the family if he will reach on time. He was calm as everything was going as planned. There was nothing to worry about. It was an easy flight. Sky was clear. He was on the right path. There was no thing to worry about it. Paris was about 150 kilometers behind me when I saw the clouds. Storm clouds. They were huge. They looked like a black mountains. Standing in front of me across the sky, I knew I could not fly up and over them, and I did not have enough fuel to fly around them to north or south. I ought to go back to Paris, I thought, but I wanted to get home. I wanted that breakfast. I'll take that risk, I thought, and I flew that old Dakota straight into the storm. So next scene, we cannot assume about the life, what is going to be happen in next moment, what is going to be next day. So we cannot assume, we cannot predict anything. Life is really so impossible. Anything can go here. So he was so happy, everything was so easy, and the flight was so easy for him. There was not a thing to worry about. But suddenly next moment, what happened? Now the plane had crossed Paris when he started seeing clouds in the sky. Suddenly, clouds appear in the sky, and they were not normal clouds, they were storm clouds. They were very huge. They were horrifying kind of feeling got him, the pilot. The presence of clouds made it unsafe to travel by air because there were chances of the storm, and they were so huge, they were so dark and big, so that the pilot compared them with the black mountains. That is why he has written here, he spoke at that moment that they were black mountains because they were so big, so huge, so mountainous in size. So he knew he couldn't pass them, as it was impossible to go above them or escape them with the amount of fuel that was left in the last tank. So the pilot, he was not having very much fuel in his old Dakota plane. He was not having two or three options. Either he has to cross the way through that storm cloud, or he had to move back. So he was in a dilemma. He was stuck at that situation, what he shall do, because there was not enough fuel in the old Dakota. So he was thinking at that moment, he was in a fix. The right decision would have been to fly back to Paris safely, but the pilot decision making was clouded by his wish to meet his family, because he was homesick at that moment. He was so desperate really wanted to meet his family, to be with the family, and to have that English breakfast. So he had been dreaming of all day about that breakfast, about the family. So he took the risk of not going back, and thus he headed the plane right into the storm. And here the problem was going to start. Inside the cloud, Everything was suddenly black. It was impossible to see anything outside the aeroplane. The old aeroplane jumped and twisted in the air. I looked at the compass. I couldn't believe my eyes. The compass was turning round and round and round, and it was dead. It wouldn't work. The other instruments, they were suddenly dead too. I tried the radio. Now, what was the scene? It was so dark because of the storm that nothing was visible outside the plane. He started losing control of the aeroplane. He was not able to handle the aeroplane, the instruments anymore. He started losing control over them. And the compass, the instrument, they had also stopped working. They just moved round and round. And due to the freezing effect of that storm cloud, they all freezed badly. They were not working anymore. And because of the bad weather, he was in a trouble. He was in a big trouble now. And he became totally helpless. There in the cloud, inside the cloud, he was not able to do anything because all the instruments, they jammed, they struck, they all stuck at that moment. They were not working. Even the radio was also dead at that moment. So he was thinking, oh my god, what happened to me? Now what shall I do? Where shall I go? I don't have enough fuel. My all instruments are dead. So in the while driving, or while piloting the aeroplane, you have to totally depend upon yourself on the instruments. The instruments are like your lifeline, and in front of you, if your lifeline is just like dead, seems dead, so you are just in the hand of god. So he was at that moment, he was stuck. He was not able to think clearly that what shall I do without my instrument. So he called finally. He tried to call to the control room. Paris control, can you hear me? There was no answer. The radio was dead too. I had no radio, no compass, and I couldn't see where I was because it was the night time. And even that man was inside the cloud, so he was not able to see anything. And I was lost in the storm. Then, in the black clouds, quite near me, I saw another aeroplane. So it had no lights on its wings, but I could see it flying next to me through the storm. And I could see the pilot's face turn towards me. I was very glad to see another person. He lifted one hand like waving. He waved at me. It was the sign like follow me. He was saying follow me. He knows that I am lost, and I thought he's trying to help me. So the here the scene was kind of movie dramatic type of scene it was. So he tried to calling the Paris control agency again and again, but his radio was dead too. He was not able to connect due to the weather, due to the storm cloud. And in the midst of nowhere, when everything failed, when there was no hope, no ray, he saw a ray of hope when he saw another aeroplane. And when the moment he saw the another aeroplane, he was so happy that finally I got someone. And he felt relieved when he saw another pilot. And the strangest thing was here that the in the another aeroplane, there was no light on the wings, and even inside the cockpit there was no light, no sign of light. But the pilot was able to see the face of another pilot. So you can assume, students, you can imagine what was the scene there, that it was very very deep dark cloud inside the one hand it was the night sky, and on the other hand it was a he was inside a black storm cloud. So it was literally impossible to see here and there in that stormy cloud. And the pilot was able to see the face of another pilot, and without any light. So it was so unnatural thing. And he thought to himself that the other pilot was is very kind, as he knew that they were lost and he was trying to help him, because the from the face, from the gesture of the pilot, that Dakota pilot, he guessed that he was calling from his face expression that come follow me. He was waving, it was seeming that he was waving towards him, and he was giving the impression that come follow me, I know the way, I can help you, so I can take you out from this storm cloud. He turned his aeroplane slowly to the north in front of my Dakota so that it would be easier for me to follow him. I was very happy to go behind the strange aeroplane like an child. After half an hour, the strange black aeroplane was still there in front of me in the clouds, and now there was only enough fuel in the old Dakota's last tank to fly for 5 or 10 minutes more. So the other pilot, he took his plane ahead of the lost aeroplane to make it easier for the another one pilot to follow him. He was calling him and he was waving and he was calling him just like to follow me. And the Dakota pilot, he was also following him like an obedient child because he was not having any option, any situation there. So he was also panicking because there was very less amount of fuel inside the old Dakota. So that is why he followed him like an obedient child without any question. He was not in the situation to raise any question there. And it was only then that he started coming out of the storm and could see the runway to land his plane safely. Suddenly I came out of the clouds and saw two long straight lines of the lights in front of me. So it was a runway in front of him. It was a runway, an airport. I was safe. I turned to look for my friend in the black aeroplane. But the sky was empty. So when the moment he came out of that that stormy cloud, he tried to search that another aeroplane because finally he was out of that stormy cloud, and finally he was able to see the runway in front of him. There was a city, there was runway, and he could now land safely on the ground. So he was so happy, and he turned himself his head here and there to search that another one aeroplane to thank him by heart that you saved my life. But there was no sign of another aeroplane. The sky was all empty, there was nothing. The black aeroplane was gone. I could not see it anywhere. So he was shocked at that moment. What happened? What is this? I landed and was not sorry to walk away from the old Dakota near the control tower. So he said, I landed. Finally, he landed on the ground, and he was not sorry to walk away because he loved his old Dakota very deeply. But this moment, finally, when he was really intention to get down on the earth, and finally he was able to come out in the night alone from that stormy cloud with the help of that strange pilot. So he was so happy that finally I am now able to, I have landed myself on the ground. So he was happily waving that old Dakota that finally I am not having any kind of regret feeling when I am going far away from my old Dakota. So I went and asked a woman there in the control tower who the other pilot was. I wanted to say thank you. She looked at me very strangely. And then that lady, she laughed. Another aeroplane? Up there in this storm? No other aeroplane were flying tonight. Yours was the only one I could see on the radar. So who helped me to arrive there safely without a compass or a radio? And without any more fuel in my tanks? Who was the pilot on the strange black aeroplane, flying in the storm without lights? So, what is a radar? Let me tell you, a system for detecting the presence or direction, distance, everything of the aircraft. It is also used in the ships, and it also used to detect other objects by sending out the pulses or the radio or the waves of the radio. The waves are reflected off and the object back to the source back. You can see that object on the waves of the radar. So this radar is used for the aeroplane, for the helicopter, for all kind of flying objects. This radar is used, and even for the ships also people are using this radar. So the author did not know where he had landed because he just landed. His fuel tank was finished, so he landed there without thinking. He was not having any option there. So, but was not afraid of leaving his plane unattended. He just left his plane there. He was happy. He headed straight into the control room and to ask about that another pilot. He was thinking that I shall go and ask who was the pilot, what kind of plane it was, and I shall thank him. So to his utmost desire, when he asked, the lady informed him that there was no other plane was there in the sky that time. except his own aeroplane. So because the bad weather, only he was only flying there in the sky. He is left astonished, he was surprised, he was wonderstruck with a lot of question unanswered in his mind. So students, here our story ends on a big surprising note. So what are your views about this story, the black aeroplane? It was about a pilot who feels unhappy uh, because he wanted to meet his family, and finally he made his decision. So that time he was so happy, he was contented because he was, after few hours he would be able to meet his family. So he was taking his flight, he was dreaming about his holiday, about family, about the breakfast, English breakfast. But he was so overwhelmed with that feeling that he entered in a storm cloud because he was so eager to meet the family members, and he even took risk on his life, and he heads straight in that stormy cloud. Everything gets dark at that moment. He was unable to see anything. All his instruments were dead. Radio was not working. All his hope was lost. And that moment when he was just thinking that now my life is over, nothing is left now, he saw another plane whose pilot was willing to rescue him. And the author was panicking at that moment because there was very less fuel was in this Dakota plane. So the anonymous pilot, he guided him to come out. He helped him to come out from that stormy cloud. And when he came out, the Dakota plane, the another one, that black mysterious plane, it was disappeared in the sky. So upon landing, when he asked the lady in the control room, he was in the mood to thank the another one pilot. So the lady surprisingly told him that there was no other plane was there in the sky. So our story ends here, and the writer has just ended up his story on a very surprising note. Now it's depend upon the readers what they can assume here, but they can find out of what they can guess about the ending of the story. That what who was that other black pilot? Was it a god? Was he was just he at that moment he was just presuming. He was just assuming there was no but one else present in that sky. Nobody was there. So it's just depend on our reader. They can make their own ending. So students, here the second part of our story, two stories about flying, second part is black aeroplane, is finished. So we have covered this chapter full. I'll share the solved PDF of the question answer so that you can complete your copies, and afterward you have to learn all these question answers. Till then, stay safe inside your house, take care of yourself and your family as well, and work hard and try to learn everything by heart. Thank you.